how racial identity is formed. Identity, I'm on a series of identity for this year. Identity is so important for the human race as our identity sets the trajectory for our life's choices, decision making, what thoughts we allow or disallow is all driven by the identity we choose to identify with. When you think of identity, think of identify. They are both different, only separated by one letter. What do I identify with? What thought content? What environmental, social, familial influences do I identify with? These are going to determine your identity. The world is a very manipulative and spiritually invalidating place in some ways. I told myself I'm going to work on managing and disciplining this physical form, not allowing myself to be consumed by lustful thoughts, inappropriate thoughts, and been porn free for about 2 months. Really been serious about disciplining my mind and my spirit just to one myself. And you know how the world is so interesting. And I truly believe this world is spiritual and not a lot of times in a lot of positive ways, because as soon as you make up your mind to do the right thing, think pure, think clean, just have a new, fresh start, right? Maybe you tell yourself, I'm not going to look at women inappropriately. I'm not going to lust after women, even in my thinking. And as soon as you make that conclusion or that commitment, you may be in a neighborhood that's generally dry, mostly old people, seniors, and babies, and nothing really popping. All of a sudden, when you commit to this one thing, the world just presents you with all of the temptation that you were trying to avoid. Sometimes that same day, you might tell yourself, I'm not going to smoke weed or I'm not going to drink. Be prepared in this world when you try to change your identity and discontinue thoughts and behaviors that no longer serve you. Don't be surprised when the world starts attracting those very, very things to you that you told yourself that you weren't going to um, essentially delve into. I'm just like, damn, it just seems like the world just can't wait to present you with temptation that you told yourself you don't want to be exposed to. You told yourself, I'm not going to look at porn. I'm not going to look at women lustfully. All of a sudden in your neighborhood, nothing but ass. That day comes out. Every other day, it's a normal, regular day. The world is a very mysterious thing where it just seems like it just presents to you things that you no longer want to consume you don't want to consume you with anymore. So just don't be surprised by that. But identity is very important. A lot of the clients I work with in therapy, they come to me because I try to help them with separating their identity, who they choose to show up as authentically, from negative thinking, negative feeling. One thing our schools and our education programs don't teach the youth enough is that we are not our thoughts. You have a mind that thinks, you feel, but these things are temporary, they're impermanent. If you were your thoughts, you will still have the same thoughts you did when you were 8 or when you were 7. Now you may have some similar interests when you were a kid, but you're not that same person. Just the act of you maturing and growing comes with shedding and releasing certain thought patterns. We are not our thoughts. Sometimes we get in our heads and we have all this thinking. If you could really see what people were thinking, you would look at them a whole lot differently. And the beauty of understanding that we are not our thoughts, we have a lot of thoughts that we're not proud of. And the ability to look at a thought, you have to first understand what a thought is to separate yourself from that thought. A thought is an opinion or an idea that is based on your history. If you didn't have a past, if you didn't have a history, you wouldn't have a thought. So your thoughts are sort of like a mirror of what you came out of. And when you're identifying even with other thoughts, you're identifying with other people's histories. And some of the most difficult, challenging clients I work with at a deep psychological level are people who have difficulty letting go of the past. If you struggle with letting go of the past, you can't accept certain things just happen and that's just the way life is and move on. You're going to find yourself clinging to the dust of these experiences in your psychology. And what happens is you end up replicating it. History that is replicated is just history that can't be released. And that's all the mind is a bundle of thoughts, and that bundle, the quality of it is a essentially a product of your history, of your past. So that's what a lot of us are doing throughout the course of the day. Is just we're replaying memories, we're replaying events, and the reason why this is important with identity is because you're in a world that is created from thought. Every television programming, any sort of social influence or stereotype or rule or belief, even that you inherit from your family or from your friends, is a thought. So if you're having difficulty fusing with your own thoughts, if you're having difficulty separating your sense of authentic self from your own mental noise, what do you think is what's going to happen when you go out into the world and you're getting blasted with everybody else's thoughts? You're going to get lost in the sauce. So, in order for you to separate your identity and who you are from your thinking, you have to first define that identity. You have to ask yourself, who am I going to be in this world? What am I going to stand on? What am I going to represent? And you want to start with your value system. You need to know what's important to you. A lot of times parents have kids for the sake of just, impressing their friends, impressing their family. Grandma said, I always wanted grandkids, right? And they give them the grandkids, but they don't know what to do psychologically with these children. They just want to brag and say they got kids, but they're not teaching their kids anything. You want to teach your kids the values of values. What's important to you? And as they get older, those values change. Maybe when they were 6 or 7, it was playing video games, going to the playground, building tree houses. Maybe at 13 or 14, what's important to them is teamwork, sports. You have to keep checking in with your kids and asking them these questions. Hey, what's important to you? Because once I know what's important to me, that gives me an opportunity to build an identity and committing to using my identity and what I choose to identify with to these values. And friends, situations that don't align with these values, I can set boundaries with them. Hey, you know what? Actually, teamwork, actually, respect, self love, loyalty is kind of important to me. I'm not really feeling this friendship or this relationship. So I think I'm going to opt out. You guys have a good time. A lot of the times, what gets us in trouble is we don't have an idea of what's important to us. We don't have a knowledge of our values. So it's easier for people to overstep our boundaries. So we kind of get along to go along. And when you don't have boundaries, when you don't have a core sense of self, you start people pleasing. I got to do this to fit in. I got to do this to kind of, keep people from being angry at me and things of that nature. Where racial identity comes in is identity is so broad. There's not enough time in a day for me to really discuss it. But spirituality is important because spirituality comes packaged with a set of principles, ethics, morals. A lot of times you don't see these same ethical principles in a world that's decaying because people are in conflict with obeying these principles in survival. So they're not going to be as consistent in modeling the true ethics of being a virtuous human being because they're fighting their own battle. So the world isn't the best resource to kind of source your example of how should I live spiritually, because people are battling every day. They're trying to answer those questions too. So you have to do that work for yourself. Of course, you have your models, you have your elders, you connect to your pastors, your mentors, whoever you need to kind of, guide you. But you have to do that work. And for me, you guys do what works for you. The Bible was the best option for me because they have so many different versions, so many different translations, so many different options. And it's a really beautiful set of ethics and principles, loving your brother, loving yourself, loving your community, right? What is love? Unconditional positive regard. I can identify with that. I can anchor my identity in that. I want to attract people who are loving. I want to be a loving person. Boom. I got one identity principle. Joy. Who doesn't want joy? Joy is bigger than happiness because happiness expires when the conditions are a lot more difficult. Okay. Happiness is contingent on your conditions. Joy, even if your conditions are overwhelming and challenging, that joy, that inner bliss will see you through those difficulties. So I can identify with joy. I want to be a joyful person. I want to be in joyful settings and attract people who have a joy in their life. And peace. Okay. I can identify with peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self control. Why not? So when you are presented with sort of information, and this is the complexity of being a human being, because to some degree survival is a valuable and important discussion point, and you want your children to have an understanding of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate in terms of behavior and connection to your safety. And unfortunately, we live in a world where there's a lot of at risk situations. So, in my opinion, I think the whole race identity conversation comes in contingent on the degree of unsafety that we have in this world. If the world was safe in an ideal imagination and there were no crime, there were no murders, there were no problems, no overwhelming difficulties or challenges, it really wouldn't be that necessary to identify with race. But since we have so many different dangers and risks and cautions and, who do I trust or what do I do? What do I not do? Here we have the race conversation. So I want to break down, how is race identity formed? Racial identity doesn't develop in a vacuum. Long before most of us consciously decide what being black, white, Asian, or another racial category even means, we have already received thousands of messages about race. Those messages come through parents, neighborhoods, schools, peers, media, historical narratives, experiences with discrimination, and the groups to which we belong. Research on ethnic racial socialization supports the importance of these environments. For example, a meta analysis of 68 studies found a meaningful relationship between parental ethnic racial socialization and children's ethnic racial identity, with heritage and pride messages showing particularly strong associations. The problem isn't having a racial identity. Problems can emerge when racial identity becomes cognitive fusion. Because I am black, I must think this way. People from that group will always treat me this way. Or if another black man disagrees with me, or he has betrayed us. So, racial identity in and of itself is not a curse. It's not a sort of, you know, You're not unrighteous because you have a racial identity. Clearly, we were born in this situation for a purpose. It's when you fuse with the distorted narratives that come with the race that the issue. It's like almost race is like a sticky glue, and it's like one of those little traps, those little finger traps, where if you pull too hard, you get stuck. But if you just kind of calmly release the finger, the trap kind of lets loose. That's kind of how race is. Like the more you have these thoughts that are misaligned to a lot of the virtues spiritually that you have been taught, whether like I'm a black person, and if these are the particular rules, these are the expectations, and if the brother don't meet this certain standard or expectation, or if people don't meet this certain need, or if everybody, if they don't show this specific degree of loyalty, they're not, and as soon as you fight with those thoughts and you try to make them go away, or you just sort of, aggressively identify with those thoughts, it's like you're stuck. And when you identify with unhelpful thoughts, you get removed from your values that were really the key to you being authentic and individual from some of these narratives, because you can still be your race and still have an authentic, sort of unique way of living that is not necessarily, you know, a part of what stereotypes say or the social expectations say. You can still be black, you can still be white, you can still be Asian, and still have a unique and independent way of seeing things that may not necessarily be a mirror match among your group. So, social identity and self categorization research helps explain why group membership can become psychologically important to self concept and intergroup behavior. Acceptance and commitment therapy gives you another useful lens. Instead of trying to eliminate these thoughts, a person can learn to notice them as thoughts, narratives, memories, and social conditioning, and then choose behavior according to that person's specific value system. What you want to do is, even in the midst of the trees, all these different thoughts, all these different narratives, all these different beliefs, all these assumptions and expectations, you still want to be able to choose a behavior. And for me, if my values are biblical and they're about love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self control, I still want my behavior ultimately to mirror these values. The thoughts and emotions that we experience as human beings are just at war for us to make a decision or a behavior that aligns. They're at war for our behavior. What can we get this person to do? Okay. And when you align your behavior with your thinking and feeling, especially if it's negative, you remove yourself from what makes you authentic. You remove yourselves what makes you special and unique in this world and what's even important to you. And that's why a lot of times, people go to counseling is because they might have done something out of anger. How many people are in prison or in jail because they did something out of anger? Right? They said something, they did something. And when you make that choice, that feeling goes away and you're sitting in prison for 10, 20 fucking years. But the feeling and the thought that put you there, that shit was 10, 20 years ago. Okay. If you need an example of the consequences of acting on a temporary thought and emotion, look at the prison system. Okay. Look at these jail systems. Now, not everybody that's in there were put in there because they did something wrong, but I'm just saying a majority of them acted off a feeling, man, I had this emotion, man, I got to get this motherfucker back. They said something to me out of line and I got to go get this gun, or this chick, she said something, this bitch said something to me, I had to go upside her fucking head. And then the feeling's going and your ass is sitting in prison fucking 20, 30, 40 years, or Lord forbid, life. But that feeling and that thought that put you in there, depending on who you are, has passed. So now you're virtuous. You done woke up. That goes to show you, okay, you're not your thoughts. You're not your feelings. You are your values. All right. Because a lot of times people who are in prison or in jail, they have values of family. Okay. They have values of respect. All right. And once the thought and the feeling, you got to look at, and they give you all these metaphors for thoughts and feelings, the storm, right? The hurricane, the clouds, right? When all of that passes, you're left with your values. Like, man, I miss my kids. Damn, I shouldn't have did this to my wife. Damn, I shouldn't have did this to my mother, you know? So don't let your thoughts and your feelings or even the thoughts and feelings of other people jeopardize your ability to live a value driven life. The shit sounds cliche right now. A lot of you guys probably would never taught about core values. You probably didn't know about values. Only value you know is probably the damn value menu. Some of you guys might know about values and different things like that. So you might hear this and the shit might go through one ear, not the other. But I'm telling you, my word won't fall to the ground. You're going to go back to this video, even if it's years, and you're going to be like, damn, I get what he was saying. And sometimes some lessons are caught, not taught. So I'm mindful of that. So take it with a grain of salt. Try to commit to your value system, even in the midst of your racial identity. Just because you're locked in on a racial identity doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your values on a cross. You can still live a life of value no matter what uniform you're wearing. 7 pillars of influence on racial identity. Family. What did my family teach me that being Black means? Family is often our first racial classroom. Parents and relatives communicate messages about heritage, pride, discrimination, safety, other racial groups, achievement, appearance, masculinity, and what behavior represents the family or community. Sometimes these lessons are explicit. Hey, as a Black man, you need to understand blank. And sometimes children simply observe how adults react to interracial relationships, police, predominantly white environments, successful Black people, or racial conflict. Research in Black families has specifically examined how parental racial ethnic socialization contributes to adolescents' racial identity development. The adult task becomes separating inherited wisdom from inherited assumptions. What did my family teach me that protects and strengthens me? And what did they teach me that I have never independently examined? Growing up, there wasn't a lot of discussion around Black pride and being proud of being Black and different things like that. But I heard a lot of messages, and I have, certain family members who did talk about these things, but it wasn't enough. So I got more of the Black is bad, these niggas ain't doing right, and these niggas ain't good. So I grew up with a lot of just like self hatred. Like it was just like Black is bad and Black guys are bad and Black men are bad. Even when I was a kid, these were things I used to listen to, and I would pay attention to how, certain family members and people would treat Black men and different things like that. And I used to just, when you're young, you kind of really don't know what you don't know, but you just feel so, it's a really hard feeling to explain. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And I think that's what kind of set the trajectory for me not really protecting myself, even in my sexual relationships, because I'm like, well, if Black is bad and I'm a piece of shit, what's the value of me setting boundaries and looking for women or attracting relationships that really honor my value? I really didn't see the value in myself. So that came with a lot of unprotected sex, that came with a lot of just me sacrificing my virtue and my ethics and sort of self-image and self-love for like validation, like external validation. So it's so important to model to your Black children um just the value of loving yourself and really valuing yourself and protecting yourself. No, it is important, Black boy, for you to set boundaries. No, it is important, black son, for you to, really think about who you're sleeping with, who you're laying with. Wear condoms if you're going to be out there sexually active. Don't just put so much self-love on what other people thinks about you, or sometimes you'll put self-love on the feeling. Man, this sex feel good, man, it feel good to bust, damn, and if a good portion of your years have been feeling like shit, the first time you bust and you're like, damn, that shit feels so good, right? So it's just really giving them that good feeling naturally. It's so important. And I understand some Black people are like, well, I don't want to talk about race because I don't want people to feel like we got excuses. And, no, you need to fucking talk about race. All right. You need to talk about race. In a world where Black children are ending up, being hung on trees, people end up missing and murder, and we can't even get any clear facts of what's going on, you need to educate, but it's not what you do, it's how you do it. Because sometimes black people can get really black and white, where it's like, oh, if I talk about race, then my children are going to hate white people. No, you don't got to teach your children hate for other people, but you need to teach them on how to understand and to be skillful in navigating hate from others. Okay, you don't necessarily have to teach your children hate to teach them how to navigate hate. All right, so family is one important piece here. And two, community and peers. What do I have to believe in order to belong? Humans don't only identify as individuals, we categorize ourselves as members of social groups. Social identity theory and self categorization theory describe how group memberships can become psychologically meaningful and influence perceptions and intergroup behavior. For Black boys and men, peer environments can communicate unwritten rules about what is considered authentically Black: masculine, respectable, weak, successful, or disloyal. That doesn't mean those standards are universally present in Black communities. They aren't. The teaching point is that belonging can exert pressure on belief. A man should be able to ask, would I still believe this if nobody in my racial group rewarded me for believing in? You see this a lot in Chinese culture. We may end up going to China in the next couple years. I've been doing a lot of videos and research, looking at a lot of videos and research of just like being Black in China. And it just blew my mind just how saturated not all Chinese people, but a good portion of that culture is in just identifying with light skin. And it just kind of, for me, goes back to just the damage that was done with colonialism and a lot of these white folks really just hammering people in the head with this whole racial. White people don't really understand in America the brevity, the legacy of hatred towards darker skinned people, the laws that they created, and just how they completely maximized and highlighted this war they had with darker skinned people, and how much that really influenced other cultures in the world. Like, I believe on Judgment Day, white people are going to have a lot of answering to do. That's just being objective about it. You know, when you're in the court of law, you can't really go in there with a whole bunch of what you feel. You're going off the facts. Okay. The judge don't give a fuck about how you feel about the crime you committed. Hey judge, I know I stole from the store, but I kind of feel like the damn Snickers was good, right? No, when you get into the court of law, it's facts. It's facts. And if you just objectively look at just how, you know, because white people have a lot of influence in this world, people tend to bow down to individuals who tend to rule with a strong arm. You know, look at these chicks. You see a lot of girls who love the bad boys, right? They look at the good guy like, dude, you're fucking corny, right? But they'll go for the motherfucker in prison or who gang banging all day, all right, depending on who the girl is. So that just got kind of shows you the backwardness of just this human psychology. All right, people tend to worship sort of like, power and influence. Okay, and I'm just thinking like, damn, here I am thinking I'm gonna leave the United States and get a fucking break, right, from dealing with these damn white folks out here in Orange County and they bullshit, and just kind of just rest my mind, right? Just damn, let me just go out, be Black, and not even have to worry about being fucking Black. Let me go look at some trees, drink some tea, go sit fucking meditate in the cabin somewhere, and I gotta worry about these damn Chinese people looking at me because I'm darker skinned. Right? Gee golly, wonder where they get that shit from. Which I'm not blaming everything on white people, because Chinese people got their bullshit too, and they got their beliefs and their ways of seeing the world and things like that in terms of their proximity to African people. But do you think the white folks helped them? Do you think they looked at white people and was like, oh, you know what, maybe we should treat these niggas better? So it just, again, a lot of this world has completely sacrificed any sense of authenticity and principles and ethics, majority of the world, for identifying with their race. And it's irrational, because you die. I can understand motherfuckers live forever. And even then, if it's not really serving or helping the human group, it's just almost like where are we going? But you'd be lucky if you get 75, 80 years out of this body. And by 35, 40, you're just really figuring this shit out. And you mean to tell me you're going to bank everything on a shell you can't even take with you when you die? It's almost like, damn, you ain't got nothing else meaningful, nothing else valuable to live for that can surpass the limitation and the limits of your flesh. It's really sad to think about. People who tend to fuse their identity with their race the most tend to be the most spiritually dead, honestly. And a good portion of the world is spiritually dead. They're just a walking dead. They're the walking dead. And they don't mind grouping up and amassing themselves in communities of people who are also spiritually dead. You know? So I don't have that much time, but anchor your identity on your value system. What's important to you, your principles, your ethics. Now, if it's important to you to be racist, if it's you're important to go along with the social engineering and the racial hierarchy, because I don't believe in God and that's important for me not to believe, then to each his own. Everything we do has consequences, even good and bad. And when the consequences creep up on you, you can't point the finger at nobody but yourself because you had a choice. You had a choice, and that's what love is. And a lot of people don't understand that because they think God should be the slave master. Everybody should do good. He gave you a choice because that's really the true power of love, is giving people a choice. So that's all I have. Hope you guys have a blessed and wonderful weekend. I probably won't make any more videos this weekend. I'm just putting knowledge out there and planting seeds for those who need it. This isn't for everybody. This channel isn't for everybody, and I would prefer it to be that way. But I do appreciate the likes and the subscriptions. I'm not really looking to get paid, so I just appreciate you taking the time. So I don't want to be an asshole about it, but I'm being careful of my words with these platforms because I also don't want to be identified with me doing things for any sort of like financial reward either.